Hello and welcome to the magic of fishing. Today you join me back on the banks of the forgotten river, or at least that's the name I gave it when I first tried the River Loddon in Berkshire. It's about half an hour's drive from home, and this particular stretch, Sindlesham Mill, is run by Farnham Angling Society. And if you've seen that video, you'll know I took a roving approach. Brand new piece of river for me. Never fished it in my life despite living close by. And I was really fascinated to explore all the different swims, the snags, the little nooks and crannies of this stunning little river. I was dangling a worm, trying to catch anything really, but particularly targeting chub and perch, and I did manage a few of each, but only very small samples, sort of 3 or 4 ounce fish. But it did give me a taste for this place, and after spending an hour or two in the dark here and getting a bit spooky, I really wanted to get back. I'm not sure when you'll be watching this video, but it's mid-September now. We're not quite into full autumn. There's 1 or 2 leaves starting to turn on the willows, but still a few flowers around, and it's a nice sunny September day. Blue skies, high pressure, perhaps not ideal fishing conditions, but we've had a bit of rain in the river. The thing I'm going to do differently today is fish in one place and fish as if I was in a match. That's something that really fascinated me when Trevor, the fisheries manager for Farnham, was explaining the history of this place. And it's well known for its specimen barbel down the years, and there are still some good fish in here. I did hear from the head bailiff for this stretch, Mick, after publishing that last video, and he told me he'd had a couple of double figure barbel out this season. Early mornings or very early mornings fishing the best. So some of the rumours of good fishing still to be had here seem to be true. I'm really keen today to fish it with a match style approach. So I've got a float rod, a feeder rod, plenty of bait, some casters, hempen tears, some worm, some red maggots, and I'm going to pick this spot, fish it as best I can and see what might be down there. Not particularly expecting big fish, but hoping for a bit of variety and really just, yeah, an experiment. Let's see what is still in this river that seems to be overlooked by many these days. But yeah, it was stories from Trevor about how this piece of river used to be one of the jewels in the crown for the club. Really popular river, and there used to be matches run on here. And during my last explore, I found this area where there's a lot more open water. It's quite snaggy and narrow, fast-paced further downstream towards where I've parked the car, but as you can see, there's a lot of open water in this peg that I've chosen here. Nice overhanging bush down to my right, and that's the sort of line I'm going to fish with a bolo float. Top and bottom float, running style, trotting down to there. And a bit further over, maybe 4/5 the way across, towards those reeds, those snags and that overhanging tree is where I fancy trying a separate line on the ground bait feeder. Also got a maggot feeder set up, a bit stronger gear in case there are any better fish around, but I think a couple of lines to start. And it really was those stories from Trev of how they used to run matches on here back in the day when the river was much more popular. Perhaps had more fish in, we don't know. That certainly seems to be the vibe from some of the comments I got. Some of you feeling that you fished it when you were young and there used to be lots and lots of fish in here, and perhaps now it's a bit more tricky. We all know the pressures our rivers are under, whether it's sewage or predators, some of them not native species, for example. But rather than get into all that, I thought, why not fish it as if I was in a match, just to see what is catchable in here really. And I've had a good plumb up on the float. It's probably 5 or 6 foot. There's good pace to the river. It's nice and smooth and slow. Reminds me a little bit of the Way, which I fish a lot near my home in Woking. And then it does get a bit weedier and shallower over on the feeder line, but I still fancy it could throw up a fish or two if the float's proving difficult. But really looking forward to watching a float go down a river again and trying to coax the fish into feeding rather than roaming around looking for them this time. You can see not only have I got my landing net, ever the optimist, but I've also put a keep net in. See what kind of bag of fish we can put together, and I really want to recreate the matches of old and see what might be possible in the modern era. I've gone for quite a heavy float, a bolo or bolognese style float, top and bottom. It's a 3 gram model, which is quite heavy to get the bait down and allow me to maintain control on a long trot down a fairly deep stretch of river. It's not really pacey enough for a stick float, but nice fine sensitive tip, very visible, which should allow me to spot any bites even if I get down beyond that overhanging tree. There's a buzzard high above me. I might just be able to pick up its calls, but it's really loud for me considering how high he is. Lovely against the blue sky and the white clouds. Right, time to get fishing. Always exciting, that first cast or put in. Of course, now I have fished this river the once, but never this particular swim, and it does feel very different to the areas that I fished, or the spots that I fished the first time I was here. Again, very sort of jungle-like, some of those swims, lots of overhanging branches and a few nettles. I remember trying to sleep that night and I'd managed to nettle my hands up pretty well. Kept me awake, but I didn't care whatsoever because I was still high on exploring a new piece of river and thoroughly enjoyed it. I can tell already that it's going to be a bit like the way I can fish in summer. There's lots of eelgrass. Despite the depth of water, it's nice and clear during the summer, and you get a lot of patches of eelgrass which is just dying off now. Now it's getting cooler at night. I can tell the float's just tripping on it, or rather the bait's just tripping on the reaching fronds of that weed, and sometimes pulling the float under, making me think it could be a bite. So I'm just going to have to find, it could have been a bite right at the end of the swim. Starting on double red maggot, Old Faithful, and yeah, I'm just going to have to work out a path, the right line. That was definitely dragging. The right line where I can run this float down, keep the bait fairly near the bottom without having to take too much depth off, but still avoid most of the weed. That sometimes takes a bit of doing, but with a good 5 or 6 foot. Friendly squirrel just came to say hello. A good 5 or 6 foot of depth, I think we will be able to find a path through. There's definitely a very smooth flow, but plenty of pace for trotting. It's not completely peaceful here because you are near the motorway, and that's the first fish. Quite near the M4 here, so there's a bit of a background drone, and that is a tiny baby roach, but it's a fish, and I'm really intrigued to see what kind of species might be in here, what kind of size fish, and how easy or not they are to catch. So nice to have a bite early on, even if it's a tiddler. But yeah, we are within hearing distance of the motorway. There's a bit of a background drone, but having come through the gate, a magical Narnia-like gate to this stretch of river, it's lovely to think that the only other person I may see here would be a fellow angler or a bailiff. As much as I like fishing in public places at times, it's really nice to be able to spread my gear around and not be constantly looking out for bike riders or paddle boarders or dog walkers. It's going to be really peaceful, certainly in terms of the bankside and the river itself. But if you've fished a match on the Loddon, I'd love to hear from you about what it used to be like and how many used to fish and what kind of weights were required. Trevor said it's a very variable river. It's got some really deep areas, some slower, wider areas like this patch that I'm fishing today, and some much more snaggy, jungle-like areas that you saw from the first video. There's also the small mill stream or carrier stream, and no doubt I'd like to try my hand back on those parts of the river again as well and try and catch some bigger fish, barbel, chub. But my roots are all round pleasure fishing and match fishing, and I've got to say it feels fantastic to be running a float down a river with a feeder rod by my side if needed. Plenty of bait, good variety of bait, and a simple task of trying to catch as many fish as I can in the few hours that we've got this afternoon. It's a lovely day, and that's a crush maggot, so another sign of fish. It's a lovely day, and although we're heading to the cooler months, it feels right for a fish or two, as well as a beautiful spot to sit in the sun or the shade, depending on where the sun's going to be, and just enjoy that blue sky and being by the water again. And that is a bleak. Not the most desirable of fish, but second species. Another tiddler right down the bottom. Are bleak going to be a problem? We'll have to see. Another small fish from further down, but that is not a bleak. It's a reasonable roach. And that was after moving to a single caster to avoid the bleak on the maggot. And that olivette, the bulk of the weight down the rig, makes for an easy swing out and really stable presentation. I'm not aiming to catch on the drop. I think the bleak would stop any efforts to do that. Getting a touch better on the caster. Just about swingable. That's a lovely roach. Happy catching those, especially in a match. And of course I'm thinking about the matches I used to fish as a teenager and a young man. Roach like that would be what you'd be hoping to catch, along with perhaps some bonus bream. But certainly before the commercial days and times when you need 2, 3 or even 4 keep nets, and you basically want the carp or nothing. And of course there are plenty of natural venue matches and silver matches on commercials, but I do miss those matches, river matches, where not that it would be difficult and you'd have a bad day's fishing, but that, you know, it took some proper watercraft and skill, knowledge to coax the roach, maybe gudgeon, perch, chub into feeding. And as much as I love my matches on the commercials that I fish each summer up near Sheffield with my old club Dronfield Woodhouse, I do keep meaning to get on a few matches down here and try and find some river matches where some old school tactics like trotting and feeder can still win you a place in the frame. And there's another fish. It's almost three fish and 3 chucks. Again, small roach. Seems to be switching on to the hemp. It's taken a little while. Double caster seems to be the bait at the moment to avoid the bleak and pick up these first few roach. There's another. Proper roach. Oh, this is a better feeling fish. Double caster again. A bit weeded up at the moment. That could make it a perch or a chub. Might not see it at all at this rate because it's gone a bit solid. Let's try giving him a bit of slack. Still on, and that slack's got him out, I think. Definitely a better fish. That's him, he's out of the weeds now. No, he's not. Very solid this time. Shame to lose it. It's not a big fish, but definitely better. Try giving him slack again. There he goes. Definitely still on. There's the float for the first time. As suspected, it's a perch. A nice fish. Not huge, but just about a landing net job, and they are brilliant at weeding you up, perch. Lovely markings. Ooh. There we go. Lovely fish. Whether I'm in a match or not, very happy catching fish like that from a river. Beautiful markings. You can see his fin. Cut that for a feisty stripey. Lovely fish. Keep the loose feed trickling in. Dragging bottom. That's still the challenge on this swim with the weed this time of year, is making sure the bait's as near to the bottom as I can get it without dragging under every single rundown. Just have to put a few inches on, take an inch off, keep trying different lines. But there's definitely fish there to be caught if I can get it right. And if the float does prove just too tricky to get right in terms of presentation, then we can always try the feeder. Yeah, that's dragging again. I'll have to take another inch off. Always easy when you're fishing with float rubbers. And we're probably fishing at only about 2/3 the depth of the swim now, which is not ideal, but with the amount of loose feed going in, there will be fish up in the water intercepting that bait as it comes down, and we'll just have to hope we can get a few at this kind of depth so we're not dragging under all the time. Well, I'm really enjoying the challenge of this float fishing. It's not easy, and the amount of eelgrass down there is meaning that a clean trot through with an expected bite is a fairly rare thing. Probably dragging under, catching on the weed 3 out of every 5 trots down, and that's despite having taken a good 2 foot off the overall rig now. So the the weed is obviously anchored to the bottom, but trailing up into the water quite a way off, and that's making the trotting tricky. Not giving up on it by any means for the session, but the beauty of being in one spot but having a variety of baits and tactics available, as you would do on a normal pleasure session or a match, is that you can try different approaches. So I'm going to give it 1 or 2 more trots down. I'm obviously catching some fish, you know. I've just put a small chublet in the net, in fact, so species wise we're already up to 4. Chublet, perch, roach and a few bleak. So quite happy with the variety of the fish and the fact that there are a few down there. It's just I'm not sure trotting in this particular swim is going to get the best out of it, or at least I want to give it a break and try something different. And with the little ground bait feeder that I've set up, we will be able to try either down on the float line where there's been plenty of loose feed going in and there may be fish willing to feed but they want it on the bottom or near the bottom, or I can chuck out to the reeds. Yep, dragging again there. Chuck out to the little bay opposite where there's some reeds and an overhanging tree. I did put a bit of feed in there earlier and see if there's anything about there. So let's put the float rod away, try something else. So I've got the feeder resting and the rod is all ready. Got a small 20 gram cage feeder down to about a 2 foot hook length or tail and a size 14, because I may want to try worm on this, so I've gone for a slightly bigger hook. Not particularly strong gear, about 3.5 pound hook length, and we'll try that with maggot on the hook to begin with. It's a really dark and quite sweet biscuity mix. Sensus gross guard on, a bit of hemp in there as well, and I'll put in a few loose offerings, but mixed on the dry side, so that should explode out, create a nice cloud near the bottom. And I hope it goes without saying, now you've seen a few of my videos, We'll keep the loose feed going in all the time. We can always go back on the float, or indeed try the feeder down that line, which I'm quite interested to do, seeing as it's more presentation troubles with the float causing me problems. If we can put a static bait down on the same line, maybe that there's a few fish down there willing to feed. But we'll give it 20 minutes or so over on the far side first. Yeah, I've not made you watch them all in real time, but I've had 3 lengthy casts over on the far side. That last one on a piece of worm, and I think I'll keep that worm on actually for trying down on this float line. Just a little bit of ground bait in the feeder. And this really is just a swing down the swim. There's plenty of depth there, and that's the kind of water that I'm not able to fish with the float because of the weed. So unless I'm getting weeded up too much on the tip, and I now don't need this tall rod rest, no point keeping all the line out of the water when you're only fishing on the trotting line. But if I can present a bait on the feeder down near the bottom in amongst the weed, albeit a static bait, I think I might pick up 1 or 2 fish this way. It'll be interesting to see, and if this doesn't result in many bites, and of course we'll have to go back on the float, but hopefully we might pick up 1 or 2 bonus fish this way. Well, just had a savage bite. Only the one, and then it's not come back again, so holding my breath, but nice to see an indication. This is actually a nice fish on the feeder. Didn't have time to film the bite or the strike, but I've played it across the river and it's now weeded me. It's out now, but it keeps weeding me down in the eel grass. Now we've got it out. Oh, and he's off. What a gutter. That was a decent fish. But yeah, this eel grass is becoming my nemesis. Let's get back out there and see if we can manage another. There's a little tap. That's taken a while. That's another fish on the feeder down the float line. What a lovely little stripey. I was just about to go back on float because it's been pretty slow, but tip pulled round nicely there, so I'll give it a bit longer. Back on the worm and missed another savage bite there. Perch, I suspect. Definitely a few fish down there. Right, I think we've given the feeder long enough. Weeded up again that time. Certainly if I was fishing a match, I'd be feeling like I'd given it long enough. I've had one or two fish, but nothing spectacular, so let's get the float rod back out. Let's see whether that continued loose feeder's got any more roach interested. Go double caster again to try and avoid the bleak. It's funny with fishing, isn't it? If you've spent ages on the float and you've got a feeder rod by your side, you always get I always get a hankering to see that quiver tip just gently pulled round and ready to go at any second. And yet you get on the tip for an hour or so, as I've just done, and it's really nice to see the float go down again. Even if the same old problem remains of that weed dragging it from time to time. You can tell the difference, very slow when it drags under, whereas bites tend to be much more positive and easier to hit. Still can't help but strike at some of the weed bites, just to be on the safe side. But you do always know when you've had a proper bite. Too slow. Definite bite, that one. Well, I think it might be a bleak. No, I was about to say a bleak. It's definitely a roach. First fish back on the bollo, and that's a nice sight. Not only to watch the float go back down the river, but to go under confidently and firmly and connect with the fish. Let's see what else we can do. Mag at that one. Really nice roach. And I've certainly not felt that I could start getting roach on the tear. It's tricky fishing, not only with the weed but with the bleak in between, and obviously the first time I fished this swim, only the second time I fished the river, so I haven't felt like the hemp's really pulled a good shoal of roach, and it's worth having a go on the tear. I have given it one or two trots, but it seems to be single or double caster picking out the fish. Well, it's about time I had some food. Been fishing 4 hours or so now, and ready for a bite to eat, so I've just put the feeder rod back out. Not too much action on the float, 3 or 4 fish. Still having to work at it, but I've got to say I enjoy this kind of fishing. You know, sometimes I miss this kind of fishing. Proper natural venue, wild river. You've got to work at it for the bites, work at it for the fish. But already getting a few taps on the quiver tip. So I'm going to grab some food and then we'll give it a last hour. Right, That's my tea eaten, and the sun is starting to get a bit lower. Probably about 6 o'clock. So we'll give it a last 45 on the float and then have a look at what we've managed. It's still there, albeit small. Another bleak there, double red maggot. But it's a sign of a river with really varied fish stocks, and I'm sure with the perch that we've seen are in here combined with these bleak, there's got to be some proper big stripers around. Who knows what it was that I lost earlier in the weed. Well, that's a bit better. Very next cast, same bait, lovely roach. Beautiful. Well folks, I for one am not complaining with this net of fish, and I certainly wouldn't mind fishing a match on here. Lovely mixed bag, some nice perch and some decent roach as well. Really nice natural river fishing. Let's get them back. Well, I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. A real mixed bag, old school fishing, and although there was nothing to write home about in terms of the size of the fish, lots of bites, and the fish kept coming throughout the session, and I'm really glad I came back to the River Loddon and gave it another go. I'm sure I will be back on the banks here soon, whether it's trying for bigger fish or just trying different areas and having a wander further upstream. So much more for me to explore, and if you are with Farnham, I hope this video might inspire you to come and have a go yourself. As you saw, lots of fish to be caught, lots of variety. If you're not with Farnham and you live in a different part of the country, I hope it might have inspired you to check out a local river in your area that you've perhaps heard is devoid of fish or not fishing very well. It just goes to show that places that are perhaps overlooked and have fallen out of favour can still throw up lots of fantastic angling. So if you're watching this and you're not yet subscribed to the Magic of Fishing, come on, hit that button, subscribe, and you will get lots more videos like this, as well as a really lovely community of like-minded anglers that's growing up around this channel. And talking of which, for all you faithful followers, please do drop me a line. You know, comments are the fuel of this channel, keep me going, and I always look forward to reading them. I'm not sure when this will actually hit YouTube. I'm hoping to get as much fishing in as I can now we're edging into autumn. It's mid-September as I film, and it may be later in the autumn or even winter by the time I publish this. There's that much fishing I want to do. So hopefully that means lots more content for you as well. And if you are watching this later in the year or even early next year, I hope you've enjoyed seeing some greenery and being reminded of what late summer looks like. Take care, and I'll look forward to seeing you again soon on the bank.